Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer. So today we're embarking on a bit of a masterclass. We're going to unravel what is honestly one of the most complex, maybe even frustrating challenges in medicine and public health. And that's this. Why do people make the health choices they do? And more importantly, how can we actually guide them toward better outcomes? Because look, if you've ever felt totally stuck when simply handing someone a pamphlet doesn't suddenly cure their habits, well, you are definitely in the right place. Consider this our syllabus for today. First up, we're looking at the behavioral puzzle. Then we'll move right into the health belief model, examine the different dimensions of health through a case study, map out our education planning, and finally wrap up with the educator's mandate. All right, section 1, the behavioral puzzle. I want you to think about this. Why is it that just giving people the facts almost never, and I mean literally never, results in permanent behavioral change? Take a look at the really stark contrast here between mere knowledge on the left and actual adoption on the right. Knowledge is just, well, it's an intellectual acquaintance with the facts, right? You get it by seeing something, experiencing it, or just hearing a report. But action and adoption, that's a whole different ballgame. Taking an intellectual fact and actually putting it into daily practice means we have to bridge this massive psychological gap. It requires building new, specific skills. It means altering deep-seated beliefs, which, remember, are essentially perceived truths that people hold without any positive proof. And it requires shifting attitudes and values that provoke really strong emotional responses. Getting a patient from just, "Oh, I'm aware," to true adoption, that is the real heavy lifting of health education. Moving on to section 2, the health belief model. To actually understand how we bridge that gap we just talked about, let's look at the socio-political framework and some core behaviorist theories behind human risk and reward. Let's break down the health belief model, and we'll use some really specific academic examples to do it. So first, we've got perceived susceptibility. Think of an individual with a family history of diabetes. They naturally feel more at risk, right? Then you have perceived seriousness. This is understanding that the outcome of a disease is severe, kind of like the intense, widespread awareness surrounding AIDS. Now, this brilliantly illustrates what happens when you combine those two. You get a true perceived threat. If a person just knows some people in their community have lung cancer, the threat feels, abstract. But if those suffering individuals are fellow smokers, boom, that combination of susceptibility and seriousness absolutely skyrockets the perceived threat. It acts as an incredibly powerful behaviorist trigger. Now, obviously, those perceptions don't just exist in a vacuum. They're altered by what we call modifying factors. We're talking demographic variables like age and sex, socio-psychological variables like the influence of your social groups, and cues to action. And those cues can be internal, like suddenly feeling really fatigued, or external, like seeing a massive mass media campaign. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is this behavioral equation. The likelihood of a patient actually taking a recommended preventative action is calculated as their perceived benefits minus their perceived barriers. It really is that simple. If the perceived barriers, the cost, the sheer inconvenience, or making massive lifestyle changes, if those outweigh the benefits of, say, eating nutritious foods or quitting smoking, the patient simply is not going to act. All right, section 3, dimensions of health, specifically looking at a clinical case. Let's move to this and see how this builds, transitioning from abstract academic theory straight into the messy, multidimensional reality of human life. Check out this generalized patient profile. The patient says, "I know I should eat better and see the doctor, but my neighborhood lacks a grocery store and my clinic copay is too high for my low income." This single sentence, it perfectly captures the exact clash we were just discussing. The patient absolutely has the intellectual knowledge. They have the awareness, but they are completely trapped by real-world constraints. For them, the barriers vastly outweigh the perceived benefits. So let's actually map out the different dimensions affecting this specific patient. Health is definitely not just physical, though sure, genetic makeup and age play a big part. But look at the emotional dimension. Long-term stress and anxiety directly alter your body systems and your health habits. But honestly, it's the socio-cultural and environmental elements that often completely dictate the outcome here. Socioculturally, having a low-income status drastically reduces the likelihood of seeking preventative health care. And environmentally, poor housing, a lack of sanitation, or living in a literal food desert without any access to nutritious food, it creates this almost impenetrable wall. We can objectively see how this patient's sociocultural and environmental barriers just completely overpower their physical health needs. I mean, you literally cannot just educate away a food desert. Which brings us to Section 4, Planning Education Sessions. Now that we understand our patients' hurdles, let's put on our educator hats and look at a systematic approach for a community facing these exact multidimensional challenges. Planning a really successful program always happens in phases, so let's look at the first 4 steps of Phase 1. First off, you don't start by talking, you start by listening. Step 1 is identifying the community's actual needs through interviews, questionnaires, and clinical exams. We have to follow that cardinal teaching principle of proceeding from the known to the unknown. Basically, find out the community's existing knowledge first. Step 2 is establishing objectives, and these must be written in a way that is highly measurable. Step 3 involves planning out your activities based on the personnel and audio-visual aids you actually have available. And then Step 4 is gathering those specialized resources to create awareness, grab their attention, and really arouse curiosity. Then we move into Phase 2, execution and review. Step 5 is absolutely critical. A good educator has to identify constraints early on. I'm talking about the limiting factors that could completely derail your project. Things like scheduling conflicts, a lack of facilities, or deeply ingrained local traditions that resist change. Step 6 is determining the exact setting where the education will take place. And finally, Step 7 is evaluation. But hold on, take note here. We are not just evaluating if they memorized a bunch of facts. No way. We're measuring compliance with instructions, we're tracking the actual incidence of disease, and most importantly, we are evaluating real, sustained behavioral change. And finally, Section 5, the educator's mandate. Let's take a step back and reflect on the overarching global vision that frames all of this work. If we look back to the historic 1978 Alma Ata Declaration, which, if you remember, pledged urgent action by governments to protect primary health care, we find the true definition of health promotion. It's defined as the process of enabling people to exert control over the determinants of health and thereby improve their health. The absolutely crucial word there is enabling. Health promotion is not something that is done on or to people. Not at all. It is done by, with, and for people. It requires active community participation. As educators, our work is basically the cement that binds together the bricks of any successful health program. Because without that cement, the bricks just fall apart. So here is your final thought, basically a final assignment for you. How are you going to apply these behaviorist models to empower and transform your own community's health challenges? The theories we've dug into today, they aren't just meant to live on a screen or in a textbook. They're meant to be taken out into the clinics, the schools, and the neighborhoods. It is time to bridge that gap between knowledge and action. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I honestly can't wait to see the impact